the Shurangama Sutra, also known as Sutra on the Shurangama Mantra, that is spoken from above the crown of the great Buddha's head, and on the hidden basis of the thus come one's myriad bodhisattva practices that lead to their verifications of ultimate truth. Fascicle 1 of 10. Translated into Chinese in the Tang Dynasty on 23 May 705 AD at Chu Monastery in Guangzhou by Shramana Paramiti from Central India. Reviewed by Shramana Meghashika from Udayana. Verified by Shramana Huaidi from Nanlo Monastery on Mount Lufo of Shunzhou. Edited by attending minister, court regulator, and former state censor Fang Grong from Jinghe, a disciple of the Buddha and follower of the Bodhisattva precepts. Translated from Chinese into English by Charles Luck. The unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in hundreds of millions of eons. I now see and hear it, receive and uphold it, and I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning. Chapter 1. The Numenon in the Tathagata Store. Thus have I heard. Once the Buddha stayed in the Jetavana Vihara near Shravasti with 1,250 bhikshus, most of whom were great arhats who had crossed the stream of transmigration. They held up his teaching firmly, could leap over all realms of existence, and had achieved the respect-inspiring deportment which was held in great esteem throughout the country. They followed the Buddha to turn the wheel of the law, and were qualified to hand down his Dharma. Being self-disciplined, they set a good example in the three worlds in which they appeared in countless transformation bodies to deliver beings and to save future generations from defilement. They were led by Sariputra the Wise, Mahamaudgalyayana, Mahakaustila, Purnametra Yani Putra, Subhuti, and Upanishad. There were also countless Pratyeka Buddhas who, since they had conquered their old habits, had nothing more to learn, yet came to the Buddha's Vihara determined to seek ultimate truth. Now, the summer retreat had just finished, when the bhikshus took stock of their errors and mistakes, and when the bodhisattvas from the 10 directions, determined to wipe out their remaining doubts and suspicions, reverently awaited the teaching in their search for its esoteric meaning. And so the Tathagata arranged his seat, and sat with crossed legs to proclaim the profound doctrine. Such a Dharma feast to purify the assembly had never taken place before, and his melodious voice was heard in the 10 quarters. Led by Manjushri, a number of bodhisattvas, as countless as sand grains in the Ganges, had come to the holy place. Meanwhile, King Prasenajit, who was keeping the anniversary of his father's death by offering vegetarian food to him, came personally to invite the Tathagata to the inner palace for a royal feast of best and rarest delicacies, to which he also invited the great bodhisattvas in the assembly. In the city, the elders and devotees also offered food to members of the order and reverently waited for the Buddha's arrival. Ananda's weakness, the reason for this sermon. Commanded by the Buddha, Manjushri took the bodhisattvas and arhats to the royal feast. Ananda, however, had not come back from a distant engagement, and so was not among the invited. He was returning to the Vihara alone, without his superior or teacher, and bowl in hand went begging from door to door in a nearby town. He intended to call first on a donor who had not given food to the monks that day, regardless of whether or not he was virtuous, a noble, or an outcast. In his practice of universal compassion, he did not especially choose a poor man as his patron. He wanted to help all living beings earn countless merits, for he had seen the Buddha scold Subhuti and Mahakashyapa, who, though being arhats, could not realize universal mind when begging for food. He very much admired his teaching, which had eliminated all his doubts and suspicions in this respect. So when he reached the town's gate, he walked slowly, adjusting his being to the rules of discipline. As he went begging for food, he came to a house of prostitution, where Matanji, a low-caste woman, succeeded, by means of Kapila magic, in drawing him close to her sensual body on the mat, so that he was on the point of breaking the rules of pure living. But the Buddha was aware of all this, and after the royal feast, he returned to the Vihara with the king, princes, and elders who wished to hear about the essentials of the Dharma. He then sent out from the top of his head a bright and triumphant multicolored light, within which appeared a transformation Buddha seated with crossed legs on a 1,000-petaled lotus. The Buddha then repeated the transcendental mantra and ordered Manjushri to use it to overcome the magic and to bring Ananda with Matanji to the Vihara. Meditative study of all as void, or samatha. When Ananda saw the Buddha, he prostrated himself at his feet, weeping bitterly, and saying that, since the time without beginning, though he had heard much about the Dharma, he still could not acquire the transcendental power of the Tao. Earnestly, he asked the Buddha to teach the preliminary expedients in the practice of samatha, samapatti, and dhyana, which led to the enlightenment of all Buddhas in the 10 directions. There was also present a great number of bodhisattvas, as countless as grains of sand in the Ganges, and great arhats and pratyeka Buddhas who had come wishing to hear about the Dharma. They all waited silently and reverently for the holy teaching. Wiping out the 5 aggregates and 8 consciousnesses to expose the unreality of ego. Probing into the false mind to wipe out the first 2 aggregates and first 5 consciousnesses. The Buddha said to Ananda, "You and I are close relatives. Tell me what you saw in the assembly when you made up your mind to give up all worldly feelings of affection and love to follow me." Ananda replied,
I saw the 32 excellent characteristics and the shining crystal-like form of the Buddha's body. I thought that all this could not be the result of desire and love, for desire creates the foul and fetid impurities like pus and blood which mingle, and cannot produce the wondrous brightness of his golden-hued body, in admiration of which I shaved my head to follow him.
The Buddha said, "Ananda and all of you should know that living beings, since the time without beginning, have been subject continuously to birth and death, because they do not know the permanent true mind, whose substance is, by nature, pure and bright. They have relied on false thinking, which is not reality, so that the wheel of samsara turns. Now, if you wish to study the unsurpassed supreme Bodhi to realize this bright nature, you should answer my questions straightforwardly. All Buddhas in the 10 directions trod the same path to escape from birth and death because of their straightforward minds, with the same straightforwardness of mind and speech from start to finish, without a trace of crookedness. Ananda, when you developed that mind because of the Buddha's 32 excellent characteristics, tell me what you saw and loved about them." Ananda replied,
World-honored one, my love came from the use of my mind, my eyes seeing and my mind admiring them, so that it was set on relinquishing birth and death.
The Buddha continued, "As you just said, your love was caused by your mind and eyes, but if you do not know where your mind and eyes really are, you will never be able to destroy delusion. For instance, when the country is invaded by bandits, the king, before sending his soldiers to destroy them, should first know where they are. That which causes you to transmigrate without interruption comes from defects in your mind and eyes. Now tell me where your mind and eyes are." Ananda replied,
World-honored one, all living beings born in the world through the 10 types of birth hold that this knowing mind is in the body. As I look at the lotus-blue eyes of the Buddha, I see that they are on his face. Hence my understanding that my eyes are on my face, whereas my knowing mind is in my body.
The Buddha asked, "Now, as you sit in this hall, where do you see Jetavana Park?" Ananda replied,
World-honored one, this great hall is in Jetavana Park, which is therefore outside the hall.
The Buddha asked, "What do you see first in this hall?" Ananda replied,
World-honored one, in this hall I see first the Tathagata, then the assembly, and only when looking outside do I see the park.
The Buddha asked, "When you see the park, what causes you to do so?" Ananda replied,
It is because the doors and windows are open that I, though sitting in this hall, see the park outside.
The Buddha then extended his golden-hued arm and touched Ananda's head with his hand, saying, "There is a samadhi called the all-embracing Supreme Surangama, a gateway through which all Buddhas in the 10 directions attain to the wondrous majestic path. Ananda, listen now attentively." Ananda prostrated himself at the Buddha's feet and knelt to receive the holy instruction. The Buddha said, "If you are right, that while sitting in this hall you see the park outside through the open doors and windows, it would be possible for someone sitting here to see only things outside without seeing the Buddha within." Ananda replied,
One cannot see the grove and stream outside without seeing the Buddha here.
The Buddha said, "Ananda, it is the same with you. If your mind is not deluded, it will be clear about all this. However, if your knowing mind was really in your body, you should first be clear about everything inside it. You should therefore see everything in your body before seeing things outside it. Even if you cannot see your heart, liver, spleen, and stomach. At least you should be clear about your growing nails and hair, about that which moves along your nerves and the pulsing of your veins. Why are you not clear about all this? If you do not see things within, how can you see those outside? Therefore, your contentions that your knowing mind is inside your body is groundless. Ananda bowed and said,
After hearing the Buddha's Dharma voice, I now understand that my mind is really outside my body. For instance, a lamp should light up everything in a room before the courtyard outside through the open door. If I do not see what is in my body, but see things outside it, this is like a lamp placed outside a room which cannot light what is in it. This being so clear that there can be no doubt, am I still wrong about what the Buddha means?
The Buddha said, All the bhikshus followed me to Shravasti to beg for food and have now returned to Jetavana Park. I have taken my meal, but as one bhikshu is still eating, is the whole community well fed? Ananda replied,
No, world-honored one. Though they are arhats, they have not the same body or lifespan. Then how can one, by eating, cause all the others to satisfy their hunger?
The Buddha said, If your knowing mind is outside your body, the two are separate. Thus, when your mind knows something, your body should not feel it, and when your body feels something, your mind should not be aware of it. Now, as I show you my hand, when your eyes see it, does your mind discern it? Ananda replied,
Yes, world-honored one, my mind discerns it.
The Buddha said, If so, how can your mind be outside your body? Therefore, your contention that your knowing and discerning mind is outside your body is groundless. Ananda said,
World-honored one, as you have said, if my mind does not see what is in my body, it is not within it. And if my body and mind know each other, they are not separate, and my mind is therefore not outside my body. Now, after thinking about this, I know where my mind is.
The Buddha asked, Where is it? Ananda replied,
Since my knowing mind does not see what is in my body, but can see things outside, I think it is hidden in my sense organ. For instance, if one covers one's eyes with a crystal bowl, the latter does not obstruct this sense organ, which simply follows the faculty of seeing to distinguish all things seen. Thus, if my knowing mind does not see what is in my body, it is because it is in the sense organ. And if it sees clearly what is outside without being obstructed, it is because it is hidden in that organ.
The Buddha asked, As you just said, the mind is hidden in the same way that the eyes are covered by the crystal bowl. Now, when one so covers them and sees the mountains and river, does one also see the bowl? Ananda replied,
Yes, world-honored one, one also sees the bowl.
The Buddha said, If your mind is like the crystal bowl, when you see the mountain and river, why do you not see your own eyes? If you do, they should be outside and should not follow your faculty of seeing. If they cannot be seen, how can you say that this knowing mind is hidden in the sense organ, like the eyes covered by the crystal bowl? Therefore, your contention that the knowing mind is hidden in the sense organ is groundless. Ananda asked,
World-honored one, I now think of the bowels concealed in the body and of the apertures on its surface. Therefore, where there is concealment there is darkness, and where there are openings there is light. As I am now before the Buddha, I open my eyes and see clearly, and this is called outward seeing. And when I close them, I see only darkness, and this is called inward seeing. What does the Buddha think of this?
The Buddha said, When you close your eyes and see darkness, is this darkness opposite to your eyes or not? If it is in front of them. Then how can this be inward seeing? Even if there is really such inward seeing, when you sit in a dark room without the light of the sun, moon, or a lamp, this darkness should also be in your bowels. If it is not opposite to your eyes, how can there be any seeing? Now, let us forget your so-called outward seeing and assume that there is inward seeing. Then, when you close your eyes and see only darkness, which you call seeing, what is in your body? Why, when you open them and see clearly, do you not see your face? If you do not, there is no such inward seeing. Now, assuming that you can see your face, your knowing mind and organ of sight should be in the air. And then, how can there be inward seeing? If they were in the air, they should not belong to your body, and the Buddha, who now sees your face, should be your body as well. Thus, when your eyes see something, your body should have no feelings. If you insist that both body and mind have separate feelings, there should be two separate perceptions, and then your body should one day become two Buddhas. Therefore, your contention that to see darkness is inward seeing is groundless. Ananda said,
I have always heard the Buddha, when teaching monks, nuns, and male and female devotees, say, when the mind stirs, all sorts of things are created, and then all kinds of mind appear. I now think that the substance of my thinking is the nature of mind, which arises when it unites with externals, and which is neither within, nor without, nor in between.
The Buddha said, you have just said that because phenomena are created, all kinds of mind appear when uniting with them. So this mind has no substance and cannot unite with anything. If that which has no substance can unite with externals, this is union of the 19th realm of sense and the 7th sense, datum. This is sheer nonsense. If the mind has substance, when your hand grasps your body, does your mind feeling this touch come from within or without? If from within, you should see what is in your body, and if from without, you should see your face. Ananda said,
It is the eyes that see, and the mind that knows is not the eyes. To say that it sees is wrong.
The Buddha said, if the eyes can see, when you are in a room, do you see the door outside? Those who are dead and still have eyes should see things. If they still see, how can they be dead? Ananda, if your knowing mind has substance, is that substance single or manifold? As it is in your body, does it spread to every part of it or not? If it is one substance, when you grasp a limb, all four should feel that they are grasped. If so, there would be no grasping of any particular limb. If there is, the contention of a single substance does not hold good. If it is a manifold substance, there should be many persons. Then, which substance is yours? If it spreads to every part of your body, this is the same as the previous case of grasping. If it does not spread, then when you touch your head and foot at the same time, while your head feels that it is touched, your foot should not, but this is not so. Therefore, your contention that the mind arises where there is union with externals is groundless. Ananda said,
World-honored one, I have heard the Buddha discuss reality with other sons of the King of the Law, that is, Bodhisattvas. He also said that the mind is neither within nor without. I now deduce that if the mind is in the body, it does not see anything within, and if it is outside, they both cease to feel each other. To say that it is within is wrong, for it does not know anything in the body. To say that it is without is also faulty, since body and mind can perceive each other. As they do so, and since nothing is seen in the body, the mind should be between the two, that is, the inside and outside.
The Buddha said, if your conception of mind in between is correct, it implies a position for it. Now, according to your inference, where is this intermediate position? Do you mean that it is in or on the body? If it is on the surface of the body, it cannot be in its center, and the conception of a mind in the center is no different from that of a mind in the body, which was refuted earlier. Moreover, is its position manifest or not? If it is not, it does not exist. If it is not fixed. Why? For instance, if a stake is driven into the ground to mark a center, when seen from the east, it is in the west, and when seen from the south, it is in the north. As this stake can only lead to confusion, so is your conception of a mind in between completely chaotic. Ananda said,
The intermediate position that I mentioned is not these two. As the world-honored one has said, the eyes and form are causes from which sight perception arises. While the eyes can distinguish, form does not follow anything, and perception lies between them. Hence, the mind arises.
The Buddha said, if the mind lies between sense organs and sense data, does it include both or not? If it does, its substance and what is outside will be mixed up together. And since the mind perceives while its objects do not, two opposites will be set up. Then how can there be an intermediate position? If it is not inclusive, that is, if it is independent of the sense organs and sense data, being neither the knower or subject nor the known or object, it has no substance. Then what is this intermediate? Therefore, your contention that it is in between is groundless. Ananda said,
World-honored one, previously when I saw the Buddha, with his 4 chief disciples, Maha Maudgalyayana, Subhuti, Purnamatrayani Putra, and Sariputra, turn the wheel of the law, he always said that the nature of the knowing and discriminating mind is neither within nor without, nor between the two, exists nowhere and clings to nothing, and hence is called mind. is that which does not cling to things called mind?
The Buddha replied, "You just said that the nature of the knowing and discriminating mind exists nowhere. Now in this world, all things in the air, in water, and on the ground, including those that fly and walk, make the existing whole. By that which does not cling to anything, do you mean that it exists or not? If it is not, it is just the hair of a tortoise or the horn of a hare. Then how can there be this extra non-clinging? If it is, it cannot be said not to exist. That which is not is simply non-existent, and that which is should have a position. Then how can there be no clinging? Therefore, your contention that that which does not cling to anything is the knowing mind is groundless." Refuting the false mind to eliminate the third aggregate and expose the unreality of the sixth consciousness. Thereupon, Ananda rose from his seat, uncovered his right shoulder, knelt upon his right knee, reverently joined the palms of his hands, and said to the Buddha,
I am the Tathagata's youngest cousin, and because of his great affection, I have been allowed to be his disciple. But I have presumed on his compassion. And so although I have heard much of his preaching, I have failed to avoid the worldly, and have been unable to overcome the magic, which has turned me around, causing me to visit a house of prostitution. All this is because I failed to reach the region of reality. May the world-honored one be compassionate enough to teach us the path of samatha, for the benefit of those lacking faith and holding perverted views.
After saying this, he prostrated himself with knees, elbows, and head on the ground. Then he stood up in reverent silence, with the whole assembly keenly awaiting the teaching. Revealing the bright samadhi. By the Buddha's transcendental power, all sorts of rays of light, as brilliant as hundreds and thousands of suns, shone from his forehead, illuminating all the Buddha lands, which shook with 6 kinds of quake. Thus a number of worlds, uncountable as the dust, appeared simultaneously, and, by the same power, united into a single world, wherein each of the great bodhisattvas, while staying in his own realm, brought his palms together to listen to the Dharma. Origin of inversion. The Buddha said, "Since the time without beginning, all living beings have given rise to all sorts of inversion, because of the karmic seed of ignorance, which is like the aksa shrub. This is why seekers of the truth fail to realize supreme enlightenment, but achieve only the states of Shravaka, Pratyeka Buddhas, heretics, devas, and demons. Solely because they do not know the 2 basic inversions, thereby practicing wrongly, like those who cannot get food by cooking sand, in spite of the passing of eons as countless as the dust. What are these 2 basic inversions? Ananda, the first is the basic root of birth and death, caused, since the time without beginning, by the wrong use of a clinging mind, which people mistake for their own nature. And second is their attachment to causal conditions, which screen the basically bright essence of consciousness, which is the fundamentally pure and clean substance of nirvanic enlightenment. Thus, they ignore this basic brightness, and so transmigrate through illusory realms of existence without realizing the futility of their wrong practice. Actual inversion, the inverted mind. Probe into the false mind. Ananda, you have inquired about the samatha gateway through which to escape from birth and death. I must ask you a question." The Buddha then held up his golden-hued arm and bent his finger, saying, "Ananda, do you see this?" Ananda replied,
Yes,
The Buddha asked, "What do you see?" Ananda replied,
I see the Buddha raise his arm and bend his fingers, showing a shining fist that dazzles my mind and eyes.
The Buddha asked, "How do you see it?" Ananda replied,
I and all those here use the eyes to see it.
The Buddha asked, "You say that I bend my fingers to show you a shining fist that dazzles your mind and eyes. Now tell me, as you see my fist, what is that mind which perceives its brightness?" Ananda replied,
As the Tathagata asks about the mind, and since I am using my own to search for it exhaustively, I conclude that that which searches is my mind.
"Thinking is unreal." The Buddha said, "Hey, Ananda, this is not your mind." Ananda stared with astonishment, brought his 2 palms together, rose from his seat, and asked,
If this is not my mind, what is it?
The Buddha replied, "Ananda, this is your false thinking, which arises from external objects, deludes your true nature and deceives you into mistaking, since the time without beginning, a thief for your own son, thereby losing sight of that which is basically permanent. Hence the round of birth and death. The sixth consciousness is empty. Ananda said,
I am the Buddha's beloved youngest cousin, whose mind so admired him that I left home to serve and make offerings to the Tathagata and to all Buddhas and enlightened teachers in lands as countless as sands in the Ganges. If I am determined to do all difficult Dharma duties, it is because I use this mind. And even if I now slander the Dharma, causing my excellent qualities to weaken forever, it is also because of this mind. If it was not mind, I would have no mind, and would be like the earth or a log, for nothing exists beyond what I feel and know. Why does the Buddha say that this is not mind? This frightens me, and also this assembly, and not one of us here can avoid being doubtful and suspicious about it. Will you be so compassionate as to enlighten us?
From his lion seat, the Buddha, in order to teach Ananda and the assembly, so that they could all achieve the patient endurance of the uncreate, or Anutpatika Dharmakashanti, held out his hand to touch Ananda's head, saying, The Tathagata has always said that all phenomena are manifestations of mind, and that all causes and effects, including all things from the world, to its dust, take shape solely because of the mind. Ananda, if we look at all the worlds and all existing things, including even grass and leaves, and investigate their roots, they are all made of matter and have qualities. And even the empty void has its name and appearance. Then how can the pure and clean, profound, bright mind, which is the underlying nature of every discriminating mind, be without its own substance? If you grasp firmly the knowledge which comes from your discriminations between feeling and seeing as your true mind, it should have its own nature, independent of all sense data such as form, smell, taste, and touch. As you now listen to my sermon on the Dharma, you differentiate because you hear my voice. The seventh consciousness is unreal. Even if you succeed in putting an end to all seeing, hearing, feeling, and knowing, and so preserve inner quiet, the shadow of your differentiation of things or dharma still remains. I do not want you to hold that this is not mind, but you should examine it carefully and minutely. That which continues to possess discerning nature, even in the absence of sense data, is really your mind. On the other hand, if this discerning nature ceases with sense data, this is merely the shadow of your differentiation of them, for they are not permanent, and when they cease to exist, so does this so-called mind, like the hair of a tortoise and the horns of a hare. If your Dharmakaya can so easily cease to be, who will then practice and realize the patient endurance of the uncreate? After hearing this, Ananda and all those present were completely bewildered. Refuting all inversion. The Buddha said, Practicing students, even after they have realized the 9 successive states of dhyana, still cannot step out of the stream of transmigration and so fail to become arhats, because they cling to this samsara false thinking which they mistake for reality. This is why, though you have heard much of my Dharma, you have failed to win the holy fruit. The inverted perception. After hearing this, Ananda, in bitter tears, prostrated himself with his head, knees, and elbows on the ground, knelt, and brought his 2 palms together, saying,
After I left home to follow the Buddha, I merely relied on his transcendental power, and always thought that I could dispense with practice, since he would bestow samadhi upon me. I did not know that he could not be my substitute, and so lost sight of my fundamental mind. This is why, though I joined the order, my mind was unable to enter the Tao. I was like a destitute son running away from his father. I only realize now that, in spite of much listening to the Dharma, if I do not practice it, I shall come to nothing as if I had not heard it, like a man who cannot satisfy his hunger by merely speaking of food. World-honored one, I am caught by the 2 hindrances, because I do not know the real nature of the still and permanent mind. May the Tathagata be compassionate enough fully to reveal to me that wondrous bright mind, and so open my Tao eye.
A bright light to reveal the one reality. Thereupon the Tathagata, from the Savastika on his chest, sent out a radiant, multicolored precious light, which illuminated the Buddha lands in the 10 directions as countless as the dust, and which, after shining on the heads of all Buddhas everywhere, veered to Ananda and the assembly. The Buddha then said to Ananda, "I now hoist the banner of great Dharma, so that you and all living beings in the 10 directions can realize the pure and bright mind of your profound and subtle nature, and so win the eye that is pure and clear." Returning perception to mind. Ananda, a moment ago you said that you saw my shining fist. Tell me, how did its brightness come about? What caused it to take the form of a fist? And with what did you see it? Ananda replied,
The Buddha's golden-hued body is like a precious hill, and manifests the state of purity and cleanness, so that the fist shone. It was really my eyes that saw him bend the fingers and form the fist, which was shown to all of us.
The Buddha said, "In truth, wise people should be awakened by examples and analogies. Ananda, if I had no hand, I would have no fist, and if you had no eyes, you would have no faculty of seeing. Is there any connection between your organ of sight and my fist?" Ananda replied,
Yes, world-honored one. If I had no eyes, I would have no faculty of seeing. So there is an analogy between my organ of sight and the Buddha's fist.
The Buddha said, "Your reasoning is incorrect. For instance, a handless man has no fist, but a man without eyes still has his faculty of seeing. When you meet a blind man and ask him what he sees, he will tell you there is nothing but darkness in front of him. Therefore, though things may be screened from view, the faculty of seeing continues." Ananda said,
If a blind man sees nothing but darkness before him, how can this be called seeing?
The Buddha asked, "Is there any difference between the darkness seen by a blind man in front of him and that seen by a man who is not blind when he is in a dark room?" Ananda replied,
World-honored one, there is no difference.
The Buddha said, "Ananda, when a blind man who used to see only darkness suddenly recovers his sight and sees everything clearly, if you say it is in his eyes which see, then when a man who saw darkness in a dark room suddenly lights a lamp which enables him to see what is there, you should say that it is the lamp that sees. If a lamp can see things, it should have the faculty of seeing, and should not be called a lamp. If it really sees, it has no relation to you. Therefore, you should know that while the lamp can reveal form, seeing comes from the eyes, but not from the lamp. Likewise, while your eyes can reveal form, the nature of seeing comes from the mind, but not from the eyes." Inverted men. Although Ananda and the assembly had heard these words, they remained speechless. As they did not awaken to the teaching, they brought their palms together, and waited for the Buddha's further instruction with their minds set on hearing it. The worldling's inverted views. The Buddha then held up his shining hand, straightened his fingers to give further instruction to Ananda and the assembly, and asked, "After I attained enlightenment, or Bodhi, I went to Mrigadava Park, where I told Ajnata, Kaundinya, and his group of 5 bhikshus, as well as you monks, nuns, and devotees, that all living beings failed to realize enlightenment and became arhats, because they were misled by foreign dust which created delusion and distress by entering their minds. What at that time caused you to awaken so that you can now win the holy fruit?" Ajnata Kaundinya then rose from his seat and replied to the Buddha, "I am now senior in the assembly, in which I am the only one who has acquired the art of interpreting, because I had awakened to the meaning of the expression foreign dust, so that I won the holy fruit. World-honored one, foreign dust is like a guest who stops at an inn where he passes the night, or eats something, and then packs and continues his journey because he cannot stay longer. As to the host of the inn, he has nowhere to go. My deduction is that one who does not stay is a guest, and one who stays is a host. Consequently, a thing is foreign when it does not stay. Again, when the sun rises in a clear sky and its light enters the house through an opening, the dust is seen to dance in the ray of light, whereas the empty space does not move. I deduce that that which is still is the void, and that which moves is the dust. Consequently, a thing is dust when it moves." The Buddha said, "Correct." The Hinayanists' inverted views. The Buddha then bent, straightened, and rebent his fingers and asked Ananda, "What did you see?" Ananda replied,
I saw the Buddha open and close his fist.
The Buddha asked, "You say that you saw my fist open and close. Was it my fist or your seeing that opened and closed?" Ananda replied,
As the Buddha's fist opened and closed, I saw that it, and not the nature of my seeing, did so by itself.
The Buddha asked which one moved and which was still. Ananda replied,
The Buddha's hand was not still. As to the nature of my seeing, which was already beyond the state of stillness, it could not move.
The Buddha said, Correct. Thereupon, the Buddha sent out from his palm a radiant ray of light to Ananda's right, and the disciple turned to look at it. Then he sent out another ray to Ananda's left, and the disciple turned to look at it. The Buddha then asked, Why did your head move? Ananda replied,
I saw the Buddha send out radiant rays of light to my right and left. I turned to look at them, and so my head moved.
The Buddha said, As you turn to the right and left to see the Buddha light, is it your head or your seeing that moves? Ananda replied,
World-honored one, it is my head that turns. As to my seeing, which is already beyond the state of stillness, how can it move?
The Buddha said, Correct. The Buddha then declared to the assembly, So every worldly man knows that what moves is dust, and that he who does not stay is a guest. You have seen Ananda, whose head moved of itself, whereas his seeing was unmoved. You have also seen my fist, which opened and closed of itself, whereas his seeing neither expanded nor contracted. Why do you still regard the moving as your body and surroundings, and so from the beginning to end allow your thoughts to rise and fall without interruption, thereby losing sight of your true nature and indulging in backward actions? By missing the true mind of your nature and by mistaking illusory objects for yourselves, you allow yourselves to be caught in the wheel of samsara, thereby forcing yourselves to pass through transmigrations. The Shurangama Sutra, Fascicle 2 of 10. Chapter 1, The Noumenon in the Tathagata Store. Actual Inversion. The heretic's inverted view of annihilation. After Ananda and the whole assembly had heard the Buddha's words, their bodies and minds became calm and composed. They thought that, since the time without beginning, they had lost sight of their own minds by wrongly clinging to the shadows of their differentiated causal conditions, and that they had only now awakened to all this, like a hungry baby who had not suckled for some time and suddenly saw its loving mother. They brought their palms together to thank the Buddha, and wished to hear his teaching on the dual states of reality and unreality, existence and non-existence, and mortality and immortality of body and mind. King Prasenajit then rose and said to the Buddha,
Before I received the Buddha's instruction, I met Kakuda, Katyayana, and Sanjaya, Viratiputra, who both said that when a body died, its annihilation was called nirvana. Although I have now met the Buddha, I am still not clear about this. All those here who are still in the stream of transmigration wish to know how to realize that mind and prove that it is beyond birth and death.
The Buddha said to King Prasenajit, Great King, I now ask you about your body of flesh and blood. Is it permanent and indestructible like a diamond, or does it change and decay? The king replied,
My body will decay and finally be destroyed.
The Buddha asked, Great King, you have not yet died. How do you know that your body will be destroyed? The king replied,
World-honored one, though my impermanent, changing and decaying body is not yet dead, I observe that it changes and decays without a moment's pause, and is bound to go out like a fire that gradually burns out and will be reduced to naught.
The Buddha asked, Yes, Great King, you are old now, but how do you look compared to when you were a child? The king replied,
World-honored one, when I was a child, my skin glowed, and when I grew up, I was full of vigor. But now I age and weaken. I grow thin, and my spirits are dull. My hair is white, and my face wrinkled, so that I know I shall not live much longer. There is no comparison between now and when I was full of vitality.
The Buddha said, Great King, your appearance should not decline. The king replied,
World-honored one, it has been changing all the time too imperceptibly for me to notice it. With the constant change of seasons, I have become what I am now. Why? Because when I was 20, though still young, I already looked older than when I was 10, while at 30, I was older still. As I am now 62, I am older than at 50 when I was stronger. World-honored one, I notice this imperceptible change in every decade. But when I look into it closely, I see that it has occurred not only yearly, monthly, and daily, but in each moment of thought. That is why I know that my body is destined to final destruction.
The Buddha said, Great King, you observe this ceaseless change and know that you will die. But do you know that when you do, there is that which is in your body and does not die? The king brought his 2 palms together and said,
I really do not know.
The Buddha continued, I will now show you the self-nature which is beyond birth and death. Great King, how old were you when you first saw the Ganges? The king replied,
When I was 3, my mother took me to worship the Deva Jiva. As we crossed the river, I knew it was the Ganges.
The Buddha said, Great King, as you just said, you were older at 20 than at 10, and until you were 60. As days, months, and years succeeded one another, your body changed in every moment of thought. When you saw the Ganges at 3, was its water the same as it was when you were 13? The king replied,
It was the same when I was 3 and 13, and still is now that I am 62.
The Buddha said, As you now notice your white hair and wrinkled face, there must be many more wrinkles than when you were a child. Today, when you see the Ganges, do you notice that your seeing is old now, while it was young then? The king replied,
It has always been the same, world-honored one.
The Buddha said, Great King, though your face is wrinkled, the nature of the essence of your seeing is not. Therefore, that which is wrinkled changes, and that which is free from wrinkles is unchanging. The changing is subject to destruction, whereas the unchanging fundamentally is beyond birth and death. How can it be subject to your birth and death? Why do you bring out Muskari Go Shaliputra's wrong teaching on total annihilation at the end of this life? Upon hearing this, the king realized that after death there will be no annihilation, but life again in another transmigration. He and the whole assembly were happy and enthusiastic at the teaching which they had never heard before. The inverted behavior. After hearing this, Ananda rose from his seat, prostrated himself before the Buddha, brought his 2 palms together, and knelt, saying,
World-honored one, if both seeing and hearing are beyond birth and death, why has the Buddha said that we have lost sight of our true nature, and so acted in an inverted manner? Will you be compassionate enough to enlighten us, and so wash off our defiling dust?
Thereupon the Buddha lowered his golden-hued arm, with the fingers pointing downward, and asked Ananda, As you now see my hand, is it in a correct or inverted position? Ananda replied,
All worldly men regard this as inverted, but I myself do not know which position is correct or inverted.
The Buddha asked, If they hold that it is inverted, which position do they consider to be upright? Ananda replied,
If the Buddha holds up his hand pointing to the sky, it will be upright.
The Buddha then held up his hand and said, If worldly men so discriminate between an upright and inverted hand, they will in the same way differentiate between your body and the Buddha's pure and clean Dharmakaya, and will say that the Tathagata's body is completely enlightened, whereas yours is upside down. If you look closely into your body and the Buddha's, where is this so-called inversion? After hearing this, Ananda and the assembly were bewildered and gazed fixedly at the Buddha without knowing whether their bodies and minds were really inverted. Delusion and enlightenment are of the same source. The Buddha was moved with compassion, and, out of pity for Ananda and the assembly, said in his voice as steady as the ocean tide, Virtuous men, I have always declared that form and mind and all causes arising therefrom, all mental conditions and all causal phenomena are but manifestations of the mind. Your bodies and minds are just appearances within the wonderful, bright, and pure, profound mind. Why do you stray from the precious, bright, and subtle nature of fundamentally enlightened mind, and so recognize delusion within enlightenment? Mind's dimness creates dull emptiness, and both, in the darkness, unite with it to become form. The mingling of form with false thinking causes the latter to take the shape of a body, stirred by accumulated causes within and drawn to externals without. Such inner disturbance is mistaken for the nature of mind, hence the false view of a mind dwelling in the physical body, and the failure to realize that this body, as well as external mountains, rivers, space, and the great earth, are but phenomena within the wondrous, bright, true mind. Like an ignorant man who overlooks on the great ocean, but grasps at a floating bubble and regards it as a whole body of water in its immense expanse, you are doubly deluded amongst the deluded. This is exactly the same delusion as when I hold my hand down. And so the Tathagata says that you are the most pitiable people. Refuting the false perception to eliminate the fourth aggregate and reveal the non-existence of the seventh consciousness. Wiping out the unreal. The non-existence of discriminative perception. Ananda's wrong view. Ananda was moved to tears by the Buddha's compassion and profound teaching, brought his two palms together and said,
After hearing the Buddha's wonderful Dharma, I have realized that the wondrous, bright mind is fundamentally perfect, so that I always dwell in my mind ground. But if my awakening has been due to the Buddha's preaching, I have really used my causal mind to hear it with reverence, thereby realizing that mind. I dare not pretend that it is the fundamental mind ground. Will you be compassionate enough to enlighten me, so as to remove my remaining doubts, so that I can return to the Supreme Tao?
Unreality of illusory causes. The Buddha said, You are still using your clinging mind to listen to the Dharma. Since, however, this Dharma is also causal, you fail to realize the Dharma nature. This is like a man pointing a finger at the moon to show it to others who should follow the direction of the finger to look at the moon. If they look at the finger and mistake it for the moon, they lose sight of both the moon and the finger. Why? Because the bright moon is actually pointed at. They both lose sight of the finger and fail to distinguish between the states of brightness and darkness. Why? Because they mistake the finger for the bright moon and are not clear about brightness and darkness. Likewise, if you mistake your intellect, which hears my preaching voice, for your true mind, the latter's discerning nature should be independent of that differentiated voice. For instance, when a traveler spends the night at an inn, he does so for a time and then leaves, not staying there forever. As to the innkeeper, he has nowhere else to go, for he owns the inn. It is the same with your mind. Falseness of both sense organs and consciousness. If it is your true mind, it has nowhere to go. Then why, in the absence of speech, has it no discerning nature of its own? This discriminating intellect does not arise only when I speak, but also when you discern my appearance. It has no discerning nature of its own when there is no form. It is not true mind, even when you reach the state in which all discrimination ceases, a state that is neither form nor voidness, which the heretics call primordial darkness. All phenomena returnable to causes are unreal. If that which has no discerning nature of its own ceases to exist in the absence of causal conditions, how can the so-called nature of your mind be an independent host if it disappears when it returns to its illusory causes? Borrowing the essence of perception to pick out causal externals. Ananda asked,
If every state of my mind can be returned to its cause, why does the Buddha speak of the wondrous, bright, original mind, which is not returnable to anywhere? Will you be compassionate enough to enlighten me?
Setting up the essence of perception. The Buddha said, As you see me now, the essence of your seeing is originally clear. Although it is not the profound bright mind, it is like a second moon, but it is not a reflection of the moon in water. Now listen attentively to my explanation of that which cannot return anywhere. Picking out causal externals. Ananda, the doors and windows of this hall are wide open and face east. There is light when the sun rises in the sky, and there is darkness at midnight when the moon wanes or is hidden by fog or clouds. Your seeing is unimpeded through open doors and windows, but is obstructed where there are walls or houses. Where there is discrimination, you perceive the stirring causes, and in the dull void you only see emptiness. An unconscious condition results from confused externals, whereas an awakened state leads to clear perception. Ananda, see now how I return each of these changing states to its causal origin. What are these original causes? Ananda, of these changing conditions, light can be returned to the sun. Why? Because there is no light without the sun, and since light comes from the sun, it can be returned to it, that is, its origin. Darkness can be returned to the waning moon, clearness to open doors and windows, obstruction to walls and houses, causes to differentiation, emptiness to relative voidness, confused externals to unconsciousness, and clear perception to the awakened state. Nothing in the world goes beyond these conditions. Now, when the essence of your perception confronts these 8 states, where can it be returned to? If to brightness, you will not see darkness when there is no light. Although these states, such as light, darkness, etc., differ from one another, your seeing remains unchanged. The nature of perception. All states that can be returned to external causes are obviously not you. But that which cannot be returned to anywhere, if it is not you, what is it? Therefore, you should know that your mind is fundamentally wonderful, bright, and pure, and that because of your delusion and stupidity, you have missed it, and so are caught on the wheel of transmigration, sinking and floating in the samsaric sea. This is why the Tathagata says that you are the most pitiable of men. The underlying nature of perception is not the essence of perception. Ananda asked,
I now understand that the nature of perception cannot be returned to any external cause, but how can I know that it is my true nature?
The capacity of perception. The Buddha said, Ananda, though you have not reached the state beyond the stream of transmigration, you may now use the Buddha's transcendent power to behold the first dhyana heaven without obstruction. Like Aniruddha, who sees this world, Jambudvipa, as clearly as fruit held in his own hand. Bodhisattvas can see hundreds and thousands of worlds. Buddhas in the 10 directions can see all the pure lands, as countless as the dust. As to living beings, their range of sight is sometimes limited to inches. Picking out causal objects. Ananda, as you and I see the palaces inhabited by the 4 heavenly kings, with all that is there in water, on the ground, and in the air, though there is a great variety of forms and shapes in the light and darkness, they are but hindrances resulting from your differentiation of objective phenomena. Here you should distinguish between your own self and external objects. From what you see, I now pick out that which is your own self, and those which are but phenomena. Ananda, if you exhaust the field of your vision, from the sun and moon to the 7 mountain ranges, with all kinds of light, all that you see are phenomena which are not you. As you shorten your range, you see passing clouds and flying birds, the wind rising, and dust, trees, mountains, rivers, grass, men, and animals. They are all external and are not you. The essence of perception. Ananda, the great variety of things, far and near, when beheld by the essence of your seeing, appeared different, whereas the nature of your seeing is uniform. This wondrous, bright essence is really the nature of your perception. The essence of perception mistaken for externals. Refuting this misconception. If seeing is an object, you should also see my seeing. If you can do so, why, when I do not see things, do you not see my non-seeing? Even if you do so, it will not be real, but your false seeing. If you do not see my non-seeing, it follows that your seeing and mine are not objects. If so, why cannot your seeing be you? Again, if when you see an object, you grasp at it as such, it should also see you. If so, that object and the nature of seeing will mingle, and you and I and the world will be in complete confusion. True perception. Ananda, when you see things, this seeing is yours and not mine, and its nature penetrates everywhere. If it is not you, what is it? Why do you still doubt about your real nature and ask me to confirm that it is not false? Wiping out the capacity of perception to reveal the true mind. The capacity of seeing. Ananda asked,
World-honored one, if I am the nature of seeing, then why, when the Buddha and I saw the palaces of the 4 heavenly kings and the sun and the moon, did this seeing first penetrate the whole world, and then return to this vihara, then to its temple, and now to this hall with its eaves and corridors? Does this seeing, which first pervaded the universe, now return to and fill only this hall? Does its previous scale not shrink, or is it cut up by the walls of this hall? I do not know where the meaning of all this really lies. Will you be compassionate enough to enlighten me?
Breaking up the capacity of seeing. The Buddha replied, Ananda, all things in this world, whether large or small, inner or outer, as well as in other conditions, are external. You should not say that your seeing expands and contracts. Take, for instance, a square box, the inside of which is seen as containing a square of air. Now tell me, is the air seen as square in the square box? Really square or not? If so, it should not be round when poured into a round box. If not, then there should be no square of air in the square box. You say that you do not know where the meaning of all this really lies, but the meaning being so, where do you want it to lie? Ananda, if you want the air to be neither square nor round, just throw the box away. Since air has no location, you should not again insist on removing the place where it lies. If, as you just said, when you entered this hall, your seeing shrank into a small compass, then, when you look at the sun, do you lift it up to reach that sun in the sky overhead? If a wall can cut off your seeing, can you prevent it from peeping through a hole in the wall? Therefore, your contention is wrong. Revealing the real. All living beings, from the time without beginning, have disregarded their own selves by clinging to external objects, thereby missing their fundamental minds. Thus, they are being turned round by objects and perceive large and small sizes. If they can turn objects round, they will be like the Tathagata, and their bodies and minds will be in the state of radiant perfection. From their immutable holy sight, the end of each of their hairs will contain all lands in the 10 directions. Removing the essence of perception to wipe out the 5th aggregate and 8th consciousness. Eradicating attachment to the ego to reveal the one reality. Ananda asked,
If this essence of seeing is my wondrous nature, the latter should manifest before me. If seeing is my real ego, then what are my body and mind? But in fact, my body and mind can discern things, whereas that seeing cannot discern my body. If perception is my mind and causes me to see things, then this perception is my ego, whereas my body is not. This is exactly what the Buddha previously refuted, with the argument that objects should then see me. Will you be compassionate enough to enlighten me?
Rooting out Ananda's misconception of objects being and not being perception. Misconception of objects being perception. The Buddha replied, Ananda, your conception of perception being in front of you is incorrect, because if it is, the essence of perception should have a position which can be shown. As you sit in Jetavana Park, you see its trees and nullas as well as this hall, with the sun or moon overhead and the Ganges in the distance. As you are now, in front of my lion seat, moving your hand to point out the surroundings, such as the dark foliage of the wood, the bright sun, blocking walls, and clear open spaces, as well as grass, plants, and very small things, although they are of different sizes, each of them can be pointed out. If they are really your seeing, manifesting in front of you, you should be able to show which one is your seeing. Ananda, you should know that if voidness is your seeing, since it has already become your perception, then how can it be empty? If an external thing is your seeing and has already become your perception, how can it be external? So, after dissecting all things in front of you, pick out the bright and pure principle of your perception and show it to me to prove that it is clearly and irrefutably identical with externals. Ananda said,
From this hall, I now see the Ganges in the distance, the sun or moon overhead, and all that I can point out with my finger and see with my eyes. They are all external things, but not one of them is my perception. World-honored one, as the Buddha has said, not only a beginner in the Shravaka stage, like myself, who is still in the stream of transmigration, but even a bodhisattva cannot dissect things and pick out the essence of seeing, which has an independent nature apart from the phenomena.
The Buddha said, Correct, correct. Misconception of objects not being perception. The Buddha said, As you have said, there is no essence of seeing with an independent nature apart from phenomena. Now, if there is no perception in the things you point out, I now ask again. As you and the Tathagata sit in this Jetavana Park, when you see the wood and all externals, including the sun and moon, if there is no essence of seeing which can be picked out from them, tell me which one is not the seeing. Ananda replied,
Of all things seen in this Jetavana Park, I do not know which one is not the seeing. Why? Because if the trees are not the seeing, why do I see them? If they are the seeing, why are they trees? If the void is not the seeing, why do I see it? If the void is the seeing, why is it empty? I too have thought carefully about all this, and now conclude that each one of them is the seeing.
The Buddha said, Correct, correct. In the assembly, all those who had not achieved the stage beyond study were very surprised at hearing the Buddha say this. They failed to understand his meaning and were perturbed and thrown off balance. The Buddha realized their perplexity and alarm, and took compassion on them, saying, Virtuous men, The words of the King of the Supreme Law are true, accord with reality, and are neither deceitful nor false, unlike those of the heretics whose sermons are arbitrary and aimless. Now listen attentively. Your faith in me shall not be in vain. Manjushri's helpful interposition. Thereupon, Manjushri Bodhisattva, who took compassion on the four Varga, rose from his seat, prostrated himself at the Buddha's feet, brought his two palms together, and said,
World-honored one, these people do not understand the Tathagata's twofold revelation of the reality and unreality of the essence of perception in form and voidness. They think that if causal, form, and voidness are the seeing, there should be an indication of it, and if they are not, there should be no seeing. They do not understand your teaching, and are therefore surprised and bewildered, but they are not like those whose roots are frivolous and inferior. May the Tathagata be compassionate enough to enlighten them, so that they know what objects and this essence of perception are fundamentally, and that there exists neither is nor is not between them.
The Buddha declared to Manjushri and the assembly, to all Tathagatas and great Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions, abiding in the state of Samadhi, seeing and its concurrent causes, as well as all forms imaginable, are like flowers in the sky, which fundamentally do not exist. This seeing and its causes are essentially the profound, pure, and bright substance of enlightenment. How can there be is and is not within it? Manjushri, I now ask you this. You are already the real Manjushri. Can there be another Manjushri who first is and then is not? Manjushri replied,
No, world-honored one, I am the real Manjushri, and there cannot be another. Why? Because if there is, then there will be 2 Manjushris. But my presence here does not mean that there is no Manjushri, with an arbitrary conception of is and is not in between.
The Buddha said, Likewise, this clear seeing, as well as the objects seen and the void, are fundamentally the perfect, pure, true mind of the wonderful, bright, supreme Bodhi, wrongly perceived as form and voidness, as well as hearing and seeing, just as the second moon is perceived with the accompanying misconception of real and unreal moons. Manjushri, there is only one real moon, which is beyond the condition of is and is not. Therefore, if you discern seeing and its objects and give rise to all kinds of mental creation, this is wrong thinking, which will prevent you from getting out of this dual condition of is and is not. If you look into them by means of this true, essential, wonderful, bright, and enlightened nature, it will enable you to avoid this duality. Wiping out Alaya's self-evidencing to reveal one reality. Ananda's discrimination. Ananda said,
World-honored one, the King of the Law has preached the nature of causal enlightenment, Bodhi, which is always present in the 10 directions, and which is beyond birth and death. Does this differ from the concept of primordial profundity according to the doctrine of Kapila, and that of a true ego pervading everywhere, according to heterodox ascetics who cover their heads with ashes and dust? The Buddha, while on Langa mountain, once said to Mahamati,
Heretics always speak of natural existence, but I preach causes and conditions which are beyond the stage they have reached.
Now, as I look into this nature of enlightenment, it is self-existent, above birth and death, and beyond all falsehood and inversion. There seem to be neither your causes and conditions, nor their natural existence. Will you please teach us, so that we shall not fall into heresies, but win the bright nature of wonderful, enlightened, true mind?
Wiping out Ananda's discrimination. Rooting out the self as such. The Buddha said, I have expediently revealed the truth to you, yet you do not waken to it, but mistake it for being the self as such. Ananda, if it is the self as such, it should show clearly that its substance is the self. Now look into this wondrous seeing, and see what is its self. Do you mean that light, darkness, clarity, or obstruction is its self? Ananda, if light is its self, you should not see darkness, and if the void, you should not see obstructions. If darkness is its self, the nature of your seeing should cease to exist when there is light. If so, why do you still see light? Ananda said,
If so, the nature of this wondrous seeing is not the self as such. I now guess that it is created by cause and condition, but I am still not clear about it. I pray the Tathagata to teach me how this accords with the nature of cause and condition.
eliminating cause and condition. The Buddha said, "You now speak of cause and condition. Let me ask you this. When you see things, the nature of seeing manifests. Does this seeing exist because of light, darkness, clarity, or obstruction? Ananda, if it exists because of light, you should not see darkness. And if because of darkness, you should not see light. It is the same with clarity and obstruction. Again, is this seeing in a bright, dark, clear, or obstructed condition? Ananda, if it is clear, you should not see any obstruction. And if it is obstructed, you should not see that it is clear. It is the same with light and darkness." Revealing the essential Bodhi. Therefore, you should know that the essential Bodhi is wondrous and bright, being neither cause nor condition, neither self as such nor not self as such, neither unreality nor not unreality, and neither reality nor not reality. For it is beyond all forms, and is identical with all things, or dharmas. How can you now think of it and use the frivolous terminology of the world to express it? This is like trying to catch or touch the void with your hand. You will only tire yourself. For how can you catch the void? Brushing away wrong assumptions. Ananda asked,
World-honored one, if the nature of wonderful enlightenment has neither cause nor condition, why has the Buddha always told the bhikshus about the nature of seeing, which exists because of the four conditions of voidness, light, mind, and eye? What does all this mean?
The Buddha replied, I spoke of worldly cause and condition which have nothing to do with supreme reality. Eliminating the essence of perception to reveal inceptive enlightenment. Wiping out Ananda's discrimination. Ananda, I now ask you this. When a worldly man says that he can see things, what does he mean by seeing and not seeing? Ananda replied,
When a worldly man sees forms by the light of the sun, moon, and lamps, this is called seeing, but in the absence of such light, he cannot see anything.
The Buddha asked, Ananda, if it is called not seeing when there is no light, he should not see darkness. If he does, this is because there is no light. How then can there be no seeing? Ananda, in the dark, if this is called not seeing solely because he does not see the light, then where there is light, if he does not see darkness, this is again called not seeing. Thus, there would be no seeing in both cases. But in these two states, which replace each other, the nature of your seeing does not cease for an instant. Therefore, there is actual seeing in both states, so how can there be no seeing? Revealing the inceptive Bodhi. Therefore, Ananda, you should know that when you see the light, your seeing is not clear. When you see the darkness, your seeing is not obscure. When you see the void, it is not empty. And when you see obstruction, it is not obstructed. After you have understood these four states, you should also know that when your absolute seeing perceives the essence of seeing, the former is not the latter, which still differs from it. How can your false seeing reach that absolute seeing? How can you speak of cause and condition, of the self existing as such, and of the so-called union? You are all ignorant and narrow-minded hearers, or Shravakas, and cannot understand pure and clean reality. I now teach you the truth into which you should look carefully. So do not allow indolence and remissness to obstruct your path to profound Bodhi. Revealing the unreality of the two realms to expose the non-existence of Dharma, or things. Ananda said to the Buddha,
World-honored one, although the Buddha has taught us about cause and condition, the state of self as such, of mingling and union, and of non-mingling and non-union, our minds are still not open to the teaching. As we listened to his further instruction on seeing that is not seeing, we became more deluded and perplexed. Please be compassionate enough to open our wisdom eye to enlighten us.
After saying this, he shed bitter tears, prostrated himself at the Buddha's feet, and waited for the holy teaching. The Buddha took pity on Ananda and the assembly, and was about to teach the profound practice of the samadhis of the great Dharani, when he said to Ananda, Though you have tried to memorize my Dharma, you have only broadened your hearing or knowledge, and are still not very clear about deep insight into samatha. Now listen with attention to what I now tell you fully, for the benefit of you and those who are still in the stream of transmigration, so that you can all win the Bodhi fruit. Ananda, all living beings are subject to transmigration through various worlds because of two inverted, discriminative, and wrong views, which, wherever they occur, cause people to be caught in the turning wheel of samsara. What causes these two wrong views? They are due to their individual and collective karmas. Individual karma. What is the individual karma that causes wrong views? Ananda, it is like a man who, because his eyes are inflamed, sees at night a 5-colored circle round the light of a lamp. Is this circle the color of the flame or that of his seeing? If it is the color of the flame, why does only the man with bad eyes see it, while others do not? If it is the color of his seeing, since his seeing is already that color, what do you call the circle? Moreover, Ananda, if this circle is independent of the lamp, the man should see it when looking at nearby curtains, tables, and mats. If it is independent of the seeing, it should not be seen by the eyes. But why does the man with bad eyes see it? Therefore, you should know that this color is revealed by the lamplight and becomes a circle when perceived by defective seeing. Both the circle, or form, and the seeing, or perception, are due to bad eyes. But that which recognizes this disease is not sick. Thus, you should not discriminate and say that it is either the lamp or the seeing, with the further idea of it being neither the lamp nor the seeing. It is like a second moon, which is neither the real moon nor its shadow. Why? Because the sight of this second moon is an illusory creation. So wise people should not say that this illusion is or is not form, or that it exists apart from seeing or non-seeing. In the same way, how can you prove that an illusion caused by bad eyes is due to the lamp or to your seeing? Still less can you establish that it is due to neither the lamp nor your seeing. Collective karma. What is the collective karma that causes wrong views? Ananda, this universe, Jambudvipa, comprises, beside the Great Sea, 3,000 continents, with the largest at the center, containing altogether from east to west 2,300 countries and other small continents, each consisting of 1, 2, 30, 40, 50, 200, or 300 countries. Ananda, in a small continent there may be only 2 countries, one of which is inhabited by people who, as a result of their evil karma, may witness all sorts of evil states, while the inhabitants of the other country neither see nor even hear of them. Ananda, let us compare these 2 karmic conditions, dealing first with wrong views caused by individual karma, which are similar to those by collective karma. Ananda, all living beings whose individual karma causes them to see wrongly are like the man who, because his eyes are inflamed, sees round the light of a lamp a circle, which seems to be out there in front of him, but in fact exists because his sight is disturbed. This circle is not created by form. However, the faculty of seeing, through which he is aware of this trouble, is free from it. Similarly, if you now look at mountains, rivers, and the country with its inhabitants, they are all created by a disturbance in your seeing since the time without beginning. Though this seeing and its causal externals seem to be phenomena in front of you, they originally arise from your subjective awareness of that brightness of reality which leads to a wrong perception of objective causal falsities. Thus, awareness and perception cause wrong seeing, but the bright true mind of basic Bodhi, which sees clearly these causal states, is free from all ills. That which realizes this awareness as faulty does not fall into delusion. This is what I mean by true seeing that is not discriminative, and about which you ask for elucidation. How can this be comprehended by your discriminative seeing, hearing, feeling, and knowing? Therefore, your actual seeing of yourself, of me, and of living beings of the 10 types of birth is a disturbance of your seeing, and certainly not that which is aware of your wrong seeing. For the basic nature of the true essence of perception is beyond all ills. Hence, it is not called seeing. Ananda, let us now compare wrong seeing caused by collective karma with that by individual karma. The illusion of a circle round the light of a lamp seen by a man because his eyes are bad, and the evil condition experienced by all the inhabitants of a country because of collective karma are both created by false seeing, since the time without beginning. Thus, the Jambudvipa's 3,000 continents, the 4 great seas, the Saha world, and samsaric countries in the 10 directions, as well as their inhabitants, are the product of causal seeing, hearing, feeling, and knowing, which arise from the subjective awareness of the brightness of supramundane wondrous mind, entailing mixtures and unions of concurring causes which result in their rise and fall, revealing the independent basic Bodhi to expose the unfettered absoluteness, or Buddha Tathata. He who can avoid the illusory mixture and union and non-mixture and non-union of concurrent causes will be able to destroy all causes of birth and death, thereby perfecting the transcendental nature of enlightenment and realizing the permanent basic bodhi of pure and clean self-mind. Wiping out all traces of the false to enter the abstruse to reveal the Buddha Tathata. Ananda, though you have understood the profound and bright nature of basic bodhi, which is neither causal nor conditional, nor the self as such, you are still not clear about this enlightened substance which neither mixture and union nor non-mixture and non-union can create. Ananda, I must now ask you a question. Since you still hold that all false thinking mixes and unites with causes and conditions, you are in doubt and worry about the thoughts of a bodhi mind arising from such mixture and union. If so, does your essence of perception mix with light or darkness, with clarity or obstruction? If it mixes with light, when the latter appears and you see it, where does it mix with your seeing? Since your seeing is clear, where can you find such mixture? If it is not the seeing, why do you see light? If it is the seeing, how can you see your own seeing? Since your seeing is complete by itself, how can it be mixed with the light? Since light is complete by itself, where can it contain your seeing? Therefore, seeing and light differ, and if they are mixed up, even the word light would cease to exist. In other words, such a mixture would suppress the light. Consequently, your concept of a mixture of seeing with light is wrong, and so is a mixture of seeing with darkness, clarity, and obstruction. Again, Ananda, does the essence of your perception unite with light, darkness, clarity, and obstruction? If it unites with light, then when the light vanishes and is replaced by darkness, the seeing should not unite with the latter. But why do you still see the darkness? When you see darkness, if your seeing does not unite with it, then when it unites with light, you should not see light as well. If light is not seen, then where there is light, do you know that it is light and not darkness? Likewise, a union of the seeing with darkness, clarity, and obstruction is equally false. Ananda asked,
World-honored one, I am thinking again about this enlightened substance. Does it neither mix nor unite with causal externals and with the mind's thinking and discerning?
The Buddha replied, You now speak of not mixing and not uniting. Do you mean that this essence of seeing does not mix with light, darkness, clarity, and obstruction? If so, then when you see the light, there should be a demarcation line between seeing and light. Now look carefully and tell me, where are the fields of light and of your seeing, and where are their boundaries? Ananda, if you do not see where light is, then your seeing will not reach it. If so, you will not even know where the light is, and how can there be a borderline? It is the same with darkness, clarity, and obstruction. Again, do you mean that this essence of seeing does not unite with light, darkness, clarity, and obstruction? If it does not unite with light, then both the seeing and light are in opposition, like your ears and the light, which can never meet. So your seeing would not perceive anything where there is light. Then how can you cause them either to unite or not? It is the same with darkness, clarity, and obstruction. Direct pointing to the one mind. Ananda, you are still not clear about the illusory appearances of all passing phenomena which vanish wherever they arise. These illusions in the shape of forms spring from their underlying nature, which is the substance of wonderful bodhi. So also are the 6 entrances, or organs, the 12 ayatana, or 6 sense organs and 6 sense data, and the 18 realms of senses, which falsely arise from the mixture and union of causes and conditions, and which falsely vanish when the same causes and conditions are disconnected. They are but creation and destruction, appearing and vanishing within the permanent, wonderfully bright, immutable, all-embracing and profound Buddha Tathata, or absolute nature of the Tathagata store, wherein neither coming nor going, neither delusion nor enlightenment, and neither birth nor death can be found. Fusing myriads of things with the absolute to reveal the identity of phenomenon with noumenon. Fusing the 5 aggregates. The first aggregate, Rupa. Ananda, why are the 5 aggregates fundamentally the wondrous nature of the absolute of the Tathagata store? Ananda, for instance, when a man looks at a clear sky with clear eyes, he sees only the void, which contains nothing. If suddenly, without any apparent reason, he steadies his seeing, it will be disturbed, and he will see flowers dancing and other objects moving in the sky. It is the same with the aggregate Rupa. Ananda, these dancing flowers come neither from the void nor from his eyes. If they came from the void, they would return to it. If there was really such a coming and going of these flowers, the void would not be empty. If voidness was really not empty, that is, if it was solid, then they could not appear and vanish in it. This is like Ananda's solid body, which does not allow another Ananda to enter it. If these flowers come from the eyes, they should be able to return to the eyes. And because they come from the faculty of seeing, they should be able to see things. Thus, when they leave the eyes, they become flowers in the sky, and when they return, they should see the organ of sight. If they cannot see things, then, when they leave, they should screen the sky, and when they return, they should veil the eyes. But when the man sees these flowers, his eyes are not veiled. Then why do you wait until the sky is clear of these flowers to say that your eyes are really clear? Therefore, you should know that the aggregate form is unreal, for it is neither causal nor conditional, nor self-existent. The second aggregate, Vedana. Ananda, when, for instance, a man is in good health and his limbs are in good condition, he does not feel anything. But if suddenly, without any reason, he rubs his palms together, he feels coarseness, smoothness, cold, and warmth. It is the same with the second aggregate, Vedana. Ananda, these sensations come from neither the void nor his palms. If they come from the void, why are they felt by his palms only, and not by his body? It should not be up to the void to choose his palms to feel them. If they come from his palms, they should not wait for the palms to be brought together to be felt. Moreover, if they really come from his palms and are felt when the latter are brought together, when they are separated, those sensations should re-enter the palms, arms, shoulders, bones, and marrow, which should also feel their re-entry. They should also be felt by the mind, as coming in and out, as if something had moved in and out of the body. If so, there is no need to bring the two palms together to feel those sensations. Therefore, you should know that the aggregate Vedana is unreal, and is neither causal, nor conditional, nor self-existent. The third aggregate, Sanjna. Ananda, if someone speaks of sour plums, your mouth will water, and if you think of walking above an overhanging cliff, you will have the sensation of shivering in the soles of your feet. This is the same with the third aggregate, Sanjna. Ananda, this talk of sourness does not come from the plum, nor does it enter your mouth. If it comes from the plum, it should be spoken of by the plum itself. Then why does it wait for someone to speak of it? If it enters your mouth, it should be your mouth which actually talks about it. Then why does it wait until your ears hear of it? If it is in your ears which alone hear it, why does not that water come out of them? This is the same with your thought of walking above an overhanging cliff. Therefore, you should know that the third aggregate Sanjna is neither causal nor conditional nor self-existent. The fourth aggregate, Samskara. Ananda, the fourth aggregate, Samskara, is like water, which flows in a torrent endlessly, and in good order over a fall. Ananda, this flow does not come from the void, nor is it due to the water. It is neither the water itself, nor does it exist apart from the void and the water. If it is created by the void, boundless space would become an endless flow of water, and the whole world would be submerged. If it is due to the water, then it should not be water, and should have its own form and location, which should be apparent. If it is water, then still and clear water should not be water. If it exists apart from the void and water, this is impossible, because space is all-embracing and has nothing outside it, and because there is no flow without water. Therefore, you should know that the fourth aggregate, samskara, is false, and neither causal, nor conditional, nor self-existent. The fifth aggregate, Vijnana. Ananda, the fifth aggregate, consciousness, is like the void in an empty pitcher with two mouths. If someone blocks both mouths and carries it to another country, the void does not go from one place to another. If the void comes from somewhere, that place should lose some of its voidness. And on arrival elsewhere, when the mouths are opened and the pitcher reversed, one should see the void poured out of it. Therefore, you should know that consciousness is unreal, and is neither causal, nor conditional, nor self-existent. The Shurangama Sutra, Fascicle 3 of 10. Chapter 1, The Noumenon in the Tathagata Store. Fusing the 6 entrances. Entrance through the eyes. Again, Ananda, why are the 6 entrances of illusions into the mind fundamentally the absolute nature of the Tathagata Store? Ananda, the steadying of the seeing that disturbs the sight, as well as the eyes in the disturbance itself, are but trouble arising from bodhi. Because the seeing arises between the two states of light and darkness, they are drawn into Alaya's perception, which is called the faculty of seeing. This seeing has no independent substance that exists apart from the two states of light and dark. Therefore, Ananda, you should know that this seeing comes from neither light nor darkness, and from neither the organ of sight nor the void. Why? Because if it comes from light, it would cease to exist when darkness appears, and would not perceive the latter. If it comes from darkness, it would be no more when there is light, and would not perceive the latter. If it comes from the organ of sight, there would be no objective light and darkness. Then such essence of perception would have no nature of its own. If it comes from the void, when it perceives these two states, it would also see the organ of sight. Moreover, the void would thus perceive everything of itself, and have nothing to do with entrance through your eyes. Therefore, you should know that entrance through the eyes is false, and is neither causal nor conditional, nor self-existent. Entrance through the ears. Ananda, if a man suddenly closes his ears with 2 fingers, disturbance will arise in this sense organ, and he will hear sounds in his head. This closing of the ears, as well as the ears and the disturbance experienced, are trouble that comes from bodhi. Since this hearing arises between the two states of stillness and motion, they are drawn into Alaya's perception, which is called hearing. This hearing has no substance independent of stillness and motion. Ananda, you should know that this hearing comes from neither stillness nor motion, nor from a sense organ, nor from the void. Why? Because if it comes from stillness, it should cease to exist when there is motion, and would not hear the latter. If it comes from motion, it should cease to exist when there is stillness, and would not hear the latter. If it comes from a sense organ, there would be no objective stillness nor motion. Then this faculty of hearing would have no nature of its own. If it comes from the void, that which can hear is certainly not the void. Moreover, the void would hear of itself, and will have nothing to do with that entrance through your ears. Therefore, you should know that entrance through the ears is neither causal, nor conditional, nor self-existent. Entrance through the nose. Ananda, if a man suddenly holds his breath, his nostrils will feel cold. Because of this feeling, he can distinguish clearance or ventilation from obstruction or suffocation, and emptiness from fullness, and can smell fragrant and offensive odors. The restraint of breath, as well as the nose and its feeling, are trouble that comes from bodhi. Since feeling arises between the two false conditions of clearance and obstruction, sensations are drawn into Alaya's perception, which is called smell. This smell has no substance independent of clearance and obstruction. You should know that it comes neither from these two states, nor from the nose, nor from the void. Why? Because if it comes from the clearance, it will cease to exist when there is obstruction. But why does it feel the latter? If it comes from obstruction, it will cease to be clear. But why does it come into contact with fragrance and stench? If it comes from a sense organ, there would be no objective clearance and obstruction. Then this faculty of smelling would have no nature of its own. If it comes from the void, it should be able to smell your own nose. If so, the void itself would smell and would have nothing to do with that entrance through your nose. Therefore, you should know that the entrance is neither causal, nor conditional, nor self-existent. Entrance through the tongue. Ananda, if, for instance, a man licks his lips again and again, he will have trouble with his sense of taste. If he is ill, he will experience a bitter taste, and if he is healthy, a somewhat sweet one. Thus, bitterness and sweetness reveal this sense which is always tasteless in the absence of stirring feelings, and which, together with the tongue and the trouble caused by the taste, are but illusion which comes from bodhi. This illusion is due to false externals, such as bitterness and sweetness, and is drawn into Alaya's perception, which is called taste. This taste has no independent substance apart from flavors such as sweetness and bitterness, and tastelessness. Ananda, you should know that this perception of taste comes neither from the flavors such as sweetness and bitterness, nor tastelessness, nor from a sense organ, nor the void. Why? Because if it comes from sweetness and bitterness, it will vanish in the state of tastelessness. But why does it feel the latter? If it comes from tastelessness, it will disappear when in touch with sweets. But why does it still feel sweet and bitter tastes? If it comes from the tongue, the latter originally is neither tasteless, nor sweet, nor bitter. Hence, we know that the organ of taste has no nature of its own. If it comes from the void, the latter not being your mouth, would taste by itself. Then what has it to do with that entrance through your tongue? Therefore, you should know that this entrance is unreal and is neither causal nor conditional nor self-existent. Entrance through the body. Ananda, for instance, when a man touches his warm hand with his cold one, if the coldness exceeds the warm hand will become cold, and if the warmth exceeds the coldness, the cold hand will become warm. This touch is revealed when the two hands meet and then separate. This contact causes the feeling of touch, which, together with his body and the illusion experienced, are but trouble which comes from bodhi. This trouble occurs where there are two false conditions of contact and separation, and is drawn into Alaya's perception, which is called touch. This touch has no independent nature apart from contact and separation, and from pleasant and disagreeable conditions. Ananda, you should know that this perception of touch comes neither from contact nor separation, nor from pleasant nor disagreeable conditions, nor from a sense organ nor the void. Why? Because if it comes from contact, it should vanish in the state of separation. But why does it feel the latter? It is the same with pleasant and disagreeable conditions. If it comes from a sense organ, it would be free from contact and separation and from pleasant and disagreeable conditions. Then your body that feels them would have no nature of its own. If it comes from the void, the latter will feel the touch by itself. Then what has it to do with your entrance through the body? Therefore, you should know that this entrance is false and is neither causal, nor conditional, nor self-existent. Entrance through the intellect. Ananda, when, for instance, a man is tired, he sleeps soundly, and when he awakes and when he sees objects, he remembers, and after a time forgets all about them. This is the inverted condition of birth, stay, change, and death, which is continuously drawn into the inner intellect. Hence, the organ of manas, which, together with the intellect and the trouble experienced, are an illness arising in bodhi. This illness comes from perceiving the two false conditions of birth and death, a perception which covers all inner data that cannot be reached by seeing and hearing. Hence it is called knowing. This knowing has no substance of its own apart from the waking and sleeping states, and from the conditions of birth and death. Thus, Ananda, you should know that the organ of knowing comes neither from the waking and sleeping states, nor from the conditions of birth and death, and neither from a sense organ nor the void. Why? Because if it comes from the waking state, it should cease to exist in the sleeping state. Then why does one sleep? If it comes from birth, it should be void at death. Then who will die? If it comes from death, it would cease at birth. Then who is living? If it comes from a sense organ, then, while the body experiences the two states of waking and sleeping, the knowing has no nature of its own apart from these two states, and will be like a flower in the sky. If it comes from the void, the latter will know everything, and will have nothing to do with your entrance through the intellect. Therefore, this entrance is neither causal, nor conditional, nor self-existent. Fusing the 12 ayatana, 6 sense organs and 6 sense data. Eyes and form. Again, Ananda, the 12 ayatana are fundamentally the same as the absolute of the Tathagata store. Ananda, just look at the grove and stream in Jetavana Park. Is it form that creates the eye seeing, or vice versa? If the organ of sight creates form, when you see the void, which is not form, form would vanish, which means that nothing would exist. Then if form is no more, what can be used to reveal the void? It is the same with the void. If form produces the eye seeing, when you see the void which is not form, your seeing would vanish, which means that nothing would exist. Then who distinguishes the void from form? Therefore, you should know that neither seeing nor form nor the void has a place of abode, and that form and seeing are false, and are neither causal nor conditional nor self-existent. Ears and sound. Ananda, in Jetavana Park, when you hear a drum beat to announce a meal and a bell rung to summon the bhikshus, these sounds succeed one another. Do they come to the ears, or do the ears go to them? Ananda, if they come to the ears, it is like when I go to Shravasti to beg for food and am absent from Jetavana Park. If these sounds come to Ananda's ears, Madgalaputra and Kasyapa should not hear them. Then why do all the 1,250 bhikshus, when they hear the bell, go together to the eating hall? If your ears go to the sound, it is like when I return to Jetavana Park and am not in Shravasti. Then, when you hear the drum, if your ears go to it, you should not hear the bell, which rings at the same time, nor the sound of elephants, horses, buffaloes, and sheep in this park. If there is no such coming and going, there would be no hearing. Therefore, you should know that hearing and sound have no location, and that both are false, being neither causal, nor conditional, nor self-existent. Nose and smell. Ananda, just smell the smoke of sandalwood in this burner. The quantity burnt is small, but its fragrance spreads to Shravasti and the neighborhood. Do you think that this perfume comes from the sandalwood, from your nose, or from the void? Ananda, if it comes from your nose, it should be produced by and spread from it. But since your nose is not sandalwood, how can there be this fragrance there? If you say that you smell perfume, it should be inhaled into your nose, but since it emanates from it, as aforesaid, it is wrong to say that you smell it. If it comes from the void, the latter being permanent, this fragrance should be so as well, and there would be no need to burn dry sandalwood. If it comes from the sandalwood, its fragrant substance has become smoke by burning, and if your nose smells this perfume, your nose should be full of smoke. As smoke rises in the air, how can it be smelt in distant places even before it reaches them? Therefore, you should know that odor, nose, and smelling have no fixed location, and that smelling and odor are false, being neither causal, nor conditional, nor self-existent. Tongue and taste. Ananda, twice a day you go out to beg for food, and occasionally are given butter and cream, which are tasty delicacies. Do you think that this taste comes from the void, your tongue, or the food? Ananda, if it comes from your tongue, the latter has already become butter, and since you have only one tongue, how can you then taste honey? If you do not, this means that your taste does not change. Then how can it be called tasting? If it changes, and since your tongue is of one substance, how can this single tongue know various tastes? If it comes from the food, the latter cannot know, then how can it taste itself? Assuming that it knows itself, it and other food will have nothing to do with your tasting. If it comes from the void, when you bite the air, what does it taste like? Assuming that it comes from the void, when the latter tastes salt, as your tongue is salty, your face should be so too. If so, all men would be like fish in the sea. If you are salty, you will not know what is tasteless. If you do not know what is tasteless and do not taste salt, you will have no taste. Then how can there be taste? Therefore, you should know that neither taste, nor tongue, nor tasting has location, and that tasting and taste are false, being neither causal, nor conditional, nor self-existent. Body and touch. Ananda, you are accustomed to rub your head with your hand every day early in the morning. When feeling this rub, do you know whether that which rubs is your hand or your head? If it is your hand, then your head, an object, should not feel that it is being rubbed. If so, how can there be touch? If it is your head, there would be no need for your hand to rub it. Then how can you call it touch? If both hand and head are subjects, then you, Ananda, should have two bodies. If it comes from the contact of your hand with your head, then both your hand and head should be one, and one thing cannot contact itself. If it is two, that is, hand and head, from which does it arise? For subject and object differ. Neither can there be touch when your head comes into contact with the void. Therefore, you should know that neither the feeling of touch nor your body has location, and that they are false, being neither causal, nor conditional, nor self-existent. Intellect and Dharma. Ananda, because of good, evil, and neutral causes, your intellect or manas always gives rise to Dharma. Are these Dharma created by the mind, or do they exist apart from it and have their own place? Ananda, if they are the same as the mind, they cannot be its objects, for they are not its causal phenomena. Then how can they have a place of their own? If they exist apart from the mind and have their own place, do they possess the faculty of knowing or not? If they do, they are merely the mind. But since they have the faculty of knowing and differ from you, they should not be your Dharma, but should belong to someone else's mind. If they have the faculty of knowing and are your Dharma, at the same time, they are merely your mind. Then how can you have another mind as well as your own? If they differ from you and do not have the faculty of knowing, where are they, since they are not inanimate phenomena such as form, sound, smell, and flavor, nor cold and warmth due to contact or separation, as well as to the void? Since they cannot be shown in either form or the void, there should not be in the universe another voidness outside the void. Assuming that there is another outer voidness, they cannot be the mind's causal phenomena. Then where are they? Therefore, you should know that neither Dharma nor mind has location, and that intellect and Dharma are both false, being neither causal, nor conditional, nor self-existent. fusing the 18 fields or realms of the senses. The field of sight perception. Again, Ananda, why are the 18 fields or realms of the senses the same as the absolute in the Tathagata store? Ananda, as you already know, eyes and form are causes that beget sight perception. Is this sight perception created and conditioned by the eyes or by form? Ananda, if it is created by the eyes, in the absence of both form and the void, there will be nothing to be differentiated. Then what is the use of this perception, even if you own it? In this instance, what you see will be neither blue, yellow, red, nor white. Where then can you show its boundary? If it is created by form, when you see the void, which means that form is absent, your perception should cease to exist. Then why do you still distinguish the void? When form changes, you notice it, but your perception is unchanging. Then where can its boundary be? If perception follows the change of form to undergo its own change, there would be no boundary. If it is unchanging, it should be permanent. Then, as it is created by form, it should not perceive the void. If it is created by both the eyes and form, these two are separate when you think that they are united, and unite when you think that they are separate. If so, both intermingle. Then, how can there be the realm of the eyes and that of form? Therefore, you should know that both causal eyes and form, as well as the so-called created perception, do not exist, and that the eyes, form, and the realm of form are neither causal, nor conditional, nor self-existent. The field of sound perception. Ananda, as you already know, ears and sound are causes that beget perception of sound. Is this perception created and conditioned by the ears or by sound? If it is created by the ears, this organ, in the absence of both disturbance and stillness, does not discern anything, and is therefore devoid of objects. If it cannot discern, how can it create perception? Assuming that hearing begets perception by the ears, since no hearing occurs in the absence of both disturbance and stillness, how can the ears, which are form, unite with external objects to produce perception? And where can the latter's field be? If it is created by sound, that is, if it depends solely on sound, then it should have no relation to your hearing. But if hearing ceases, there will be no sound. Now, assuming that it is really created by sound, and that sound exists because of hearing, then your hearing of sound should be perceived by the ears. If this sound is not perceived, it would have no relation with the realm of ear perception. On the other hand, if it is heard, it is already sound, and since it is hearing's object, it cannot discern anything. Then who knows the perception? If there is no such knower, you will be like grass and plants. There cannot be a mixing of sound and hearing to create between them an intermediate realm of perception by the ear, for such a realm cannot be at the center, in the inner organ, or in the outer sound. Therefore, neither ears nor sound exist as causes, nor perception by the ear as effect, and ears, sound, and its field are neither causal, nor conditional, nor self-existent. The field of smell perception. Ananda, as you already know, the nose and smell are causes that beget the perception of smell. Is this perception created and conditioned by the nose or by smell? If so, Ananda, what is this nose? Is it that hooked and fleshy part of your face with which you sniff? But this piece of flesh belongs to the body, and the body's perception is called touch. The body is not the nose, and touch is its object. If the nose cannot be named, where is it? If it perceives smell, where is that perception in your mind? If perception comes from a part of the face, it is touch and has nothing to do with the nose. If it comes from the void, it should be known by the latter instead of being felt by the flesh. If so, the void should be you, and your body would feel nothing. Then there would be no Ananda anywhere at the moment. If smell is the knower, it should know itself, and would have nothing to do with you. If good and bad smells create your nose, they should not produce sandalwood and fetid herbs. Without the latter, smell your own nose, and see if it is fragrant or offensive. Since fragrance cannot stink, and stench cannot be fragrant, if you can smell both, you should have two noses. And now, as you ask me about the Dharma, there should be two Anandas. Then, which Ananda are you? If there is only one nose, and if fragrance and stench are not two different smells, they can be mistaken for each other, which proves that neither exists. If so, where can the field of smell perception be established? If it is created by smell, and if perception exists because of smell, it is like your eyes, which can see things but not themselves, so that perception which exists because of smell should not scent it, If it does, it cannot be created by smell, and if it does not, it is deprived of that perception. Since smell does not depend on perception, it has no field. If perception cannot smell, its field cannot be established on the basis of smell. Since there is no intermediate perception between nose and smell, there would be neither inner organ nor outer object. Thus, smell perception is false. Therefore, neither nose nor smell as causes, nor the field of smell perception as their creation exist, while nose, smell, and its field are neither causal nor conditional nor self-existent. The field of taste perception. Ananda, as you already know, tongue and taste are causes that beget perception by the tongue. Is this perception created and conditioned by the tongue or by taste? Ananda, if it is created by the tongue, then sugarcane, sour black plums, bitter wort, rock salt, wild spikenard, ginger, and cassia would be tasteless. Taste your own tongue and see if it is sweet or bitter. If it is bitter, who is the taster? Since the tongue cannot taste itself, who experiences the taste? If it is not bitter, no taste can come from it. Then how can it be conditioned? If perception derives from taste, it would be taste itself, but, like the tongue, it cannot taste itself. Then how can it distinguish various flavors? Again, since there are many flavors which cannot come from a single source, there should be as many corresponding perceptions. If there is only one, and if it is created by different flavors, then all salt, insipid, sweet, and bitter flavors should unite and become one. Then there would be no discerning. If so, there would be no perception by the tongue. How, then, can the tongue, taste, and perception be conditioned? The void cannot make your mind perceive. Since tongue organ and taste object cannot unite to create an intermediate perception, where is the latter's field? Therefore, tongue and taste as causes and the field of taste perception as their creation do not exist, while tongue, taste, and their field of perception are neither causal, nor conditional, nor self-existent. The field of touch perception. Ananda, as you already know, body and touch are causes that create the perception of touch. Is this created and conditioned by the body or by touch? Ananda, if it is created by the body, what does the latter perceive when there is neither contact nor separation? If by touch, your body would not be needed, then who can, without a body, feel contact and separation? Ananda, objects do not perceive touch, but the body knows and feels it. Body's perception is revealed by touch and touch through the body. Therefore, body and touch are inseparable, but they are not the same, and so originally they have no home. When touch contacts body, it becomes the body, and when it ceases, it becomes the void. Since there are no such things as inner body and outer touch, how can there be an intermediate perception between them? Where then is the field of body perception? Therefore, body and touch as causes and body perception as their creation do not exist, and all three are neither causal, nor conditional, nor self-existent. The field of the sixth, consciousness. Ananda, as you already know, intellect or manas, and dharma or ideas are causes that create the sixth, consciousness. Is this consciousness created and conditioned by intellect or by dharma? Ananda, if this consciousness is created by intellect, the latter, as organ, should contain dharma as object to reveal its own existence. In the absence of dharma, your intellect does not exist and cannot create anything. Even if it does create consciousness, what is the latter's use if it is not confronted with causal ideas or dharma? Moreover, both your mind, that is the sixth consciousness, and your thinking process, that is the intellect, discern ideas and things. Are they the same as or different from each other? If the same, consciousness is just intellect. Then how can it be created by intellect? If different, consciousness would be unconscious. Then how can it come from intellect? If it is also conscious, then tell me what intellect and consciousness are. Therefore, they are neither the same nor different. Then where is the field of consciousness? If consciousness is created by dharma, all things in the world are inseparable from the five sense data of form, sound, smell, taste, and touch, which clearly correspond with the sense organs and are not affected by the intellect. If your consciousness depends on dharma for its existence, look carefully into dharma and see what they look like, for beyond form and voidness, motion and stillness, clearness and obstruction, union and separation, and birth and death, where can dharma be found? For dharma arise simultaneously with form, voidness, etc., and vanish with them. Since there are no causes leading to their creation, what are the forms and shapes of Dharma? If these do not exist, what then conditions Dharma? Therefore, intellect and Dharma as causes, and the field of the sixth consciousness as their creation, do not exist, and they are neither causal, nor conditional, nor self-existent. Fusing the seven elements into the Absolute to reveal the free intermingling of phenomenon and noumenon. Ananda said to the Buddha,
World-honored one, the Tathagata has often spoken of cause, condition, and the state of the self as such, and has taught us that all changes and transformations in the world are due to the mixture and fusion of the four elements. Why does he now wipe out all concepts of cause, condition, and the state of self as such? I do not understand. Will he be compassionate enough to explain in full to all living beings the mean which is beyond all sophistry?
The Buddha replied, You are tired of and have sought to abandon the Hinayana teaching on the Shravaka and Pratyeka Buddha stages, and so wish to seek unsurpassed Bodhi. I will therefore teach you the supreme truth. Why do you still restrict yourself by reasoning frivolously about false causes and conditions? Although you have listened to me a lot, you are like one who is accustomed to talk about medicines, but who, when he sees them, cannot pick out those which are good. This is why the Tathagata says that you are really to be pitied. Listen with attention to what I now tell you, so that all who practice Mahayana in the future can attain reality. Ananda kept silent, awaiting the holy teaching. Exposing faulty differentiation. Ananda, as you have said, when the four elements mix and fuse, they cause all kinds of transformation in the world. But they cannot mix and unite if it is against their nature, just as the void cannot with form. On the other hand, if they so mix and fuse, they are transformations, and owe their existence wholly to their mutual dependence. They are thus subject to creation and destruction in endless succession, like the ring of fire caused when a torch is waved in a circle. Pointing to the one source. Ananda, this is like water, which, after becoming ice, can change back into water. Instruction on the seven elements. The element of earth. Look at the element of earth, which ranges in size from the great earth to a tiny speck of dust. Split this speck, which is near to nothing, and reduce it to the finest mote on the extreme border of form. Then split it again, and it becomes the void. Ananda, if this mote can be reduced to nothing, you should know that form comes from the void. You now ask about material changes which you attribute to the mixing and uniting of the four elements. Take, for instance, this mote, which is nearest to the void. How much voidness should be mixed and united to produce it? But it is absurd to suppose that this can be done by uniting motes. Since a mote can be split and reduced to voidness, how many particles of form should be fused together to create the void? The union of form with form produces form, but not voidness, and the union of the void with the void produces voidness, but not form. Form can be split up, but how can the void unite with form? You do not know that in the Tathagata store, both form and its opposite, the void, arise from self-nature and are identical with each other, and that the element of earth is fundamentally pure and clean, embraces all in the Dharma realm, and manifests because the minds of living beings know and distinguish between things in accordance with the laws of karma. Ignorant worldlings wrongly attribute this to cause, condition, and the state of the self as such, because their consciousnesses differentiate and discriminate without their knowing that the language they use has no real meaning. The element of fire. Ananda, fire has no ego, but exists because of external causes. When people in a town are about to prepare their meals, they use mirrors of polished metal to obtain fire from the sun. Ananda, about your idea of mixture and union, take this community of myself and 1,250 bhikshus. Though the group is one, each member has his own body, clan, and name, like Sariputra, who is a Brahmin, or Uvilva, a Kasyapa tribesman, and you, Ananda, who are of the Gautama clan. Ananda, if fire comes from the mixture and fusion of the elements, when a man holds a mirror to obtain fire in the sun, does this fire come from the mirror, the moksha, or the sun? Ananda, if it comes from the sun, it can burn the moksha in your hand. If so, all the trees will be scorched. If it comes from the mirror, and then lights the moksha, why does it not melt the mirror and burn your hand? But if you do not even feel the heat, how can the mirror melt? If it comes from the moksha, why does the latter require the sun and the mirror to make it burn? Look at the mirror held by the hand, the sun up in the sky, and the moxa which originally came from the ground. How can fire travel elsewhere before coming here? Moreover, the sun and the mirror are a very long way apart, and cannot mix and unite with each other. Finally, fire cannot exist by itself. You do not realize that in the Tathagata store, both fire and its opposite, the void, arise from the self-nature and are identical with each other, and that the element of fire is fundamentally pure and clean, embraces all in the Dharma realm, and manifests because the mind of living beings know and distinguish between things. Ananda, you should know that the fire is produced wherever a man holds a mirror in the sun, and that if mirrors are held up throughout the Dharma realm, fire will spring up everywhere in accordance with the laws of karma, and not in a given place and direction. Ignorant worldlings wrongly attribute this to cause, condition, and the state of the self as such, without realizing that it is because their consciousnesses differentiate and discriminate, and that the language they use has no real meaning. The element of water. Ananda, water is unstable by nature, for it either flows or is still. Great magicians in Sravasti, such as Kapila, Chakra, Padma, and Hasta, obtain water to mix with their medicines by exposing a crystal ball to the full moon. Does this water come from the ball, the void, or the moon? Ananda, if it comes from the moon, which is a very long way off, it should pass through the trees in the forest before reaching the crystal ball to flow into the bowl. If it does not flow through the trees, this shows that it does not drop from the moon. If it comes from the crystal ball, it should flow regularly, and not only when the moon is full. If it comes from the void of space, which is boundless, it should flow everywhere, submerging everything between earth and heaven. If so, how can there be living beings to walk on the earth, fly in the air, and swim in the water? Think of all this again. The moon is in the sky. The crystal ball is in the man's hand, and the bowl is in front of him. So where does this water come from to flow into the bowl? The moon and the ball are a very long way apart, and cannot mix and unite with each other. It is absurd to say that this water does not come from any source. You do not know that in the Tathagata store, both water and its opposite, the void, arise from self-nature and are identical with each other, and that the element of water is fundamentally pure and clean, embraces all in the Dharma realm, and manifests because the minds of living beings know and distinguish between things. Thus, water flows wherever crystal balls are used to collect it, and if they are held up throughout the Dharma realm, it will flow everywhere in accordance with the laws of karma, and not in a given place or direction. Ignorant worldlings wrongly attribute this to cause, condition, and the state of the self as such, without knowing that it is because their consciousnesses differentiate and discriminate, and that the language they use has no real meaning. The element of wind. Ananda, the element of wind has no substance, and either moves or is still. When you join a gathering and adjust your robe, the hem occasionally brushes the person next to you, disturbing the air which fans his face. Does this wind come from the hem of your robe, from the void, or from that man's face? Ananda, if it comes from the hem of your robe, the latter should leave your body to brush the man's face. As I preach the Dharma here, my robe does not move. Where can you find any wind in it? It has no hidden place where wind can be stored. If the wind comes from the void, why does it not fan the man when your robe is still? Moreover, the void is permanent, and so should be the wind. Then, without the wind, there would be no void. You can feel when the wind stops fanning, but what indication can there be when the void ceases to exist? If the void can be created and destroyed, it cannot really be void, and if it is, how can it create the wind? If the wind comes from your neighbor's face, it should also fan you. Then why does not your robe, when brushing against him, fan you back? Look into this carefully. The robe which you adjust is yours. The face fanned is that of another bhikshu, and the void is still and does not move. Then where does the wind come from? The wind and the void differ, and can neither mix nor unite, while the wind cannot exist of itself without a cause. You do not realize that in the Tathagata store, wind and its opposite, the void, arise from self-nature and are identical with each other, that the element of wind is fundamentally pure and clean, and embraces all in the Dharma realm, and manifests because the minds of living beings know and distinguish between things. If, Ananda, you move your robe, a light wind stirs, And if there is similar movement throughout the Dharma realm, there will be wind all over the world in accordance with the laws of karma, and not in a given place or direction. Ignorant worldlings attribute the element of wind to cause, condition, and the state of the self as such, because their consciousnesses differentiate and discriminate without realizing that the language they use has no real meaning. The element of space. Ananda, space has no shape and is discernible only where there is form. As Shravasti is far from the river, people of different castes, such as Kshatriya, Brahmin, Vaisya, Sudra, Bharadvaja, and Chandala, who come to live there, dig wells to find water. Each foot of earth is replaced by a foot of space, and 10 feet of earth by 10 feet of space, so that the shallowness or depth of each well corresponds with the amount of earth removed. Does this space come from the earth, from the digging, or from itself as such? Ananda, if space exists of itself, why, before the digging, was it not unobstructed by the earth? Why was there only earth without any space being seen there? If space comes from the earth, it should be seen to enter the well when the earth is being dug out. If only the earth is removed without space entering the well, how can space come from the earth? If earth is not excavated and space does not fill in the hole, both space and earth should be the same. Then why is not space dug out with the earth? If space comes from the digging, when the former is produced by the latter, no earth should be removed. If space does not come from the digging, why, when earth is being dug out, is space seen in the well? Think about all this, and see where space comes from when a man uses his hands to dig earth to make a well. For digging and space are not in the same category, and can be neither mixed nor united, and it is absurd to suppose that space exists of itself, without coming from any cause. If space is perfectly all-embracing and essentially unmoving, you should know that it and the elements of earth, water, fire, and wind, which together are called the 5 elements, intermingle naturally and are merely the uncreated and unending Tathagata store. Ananda, since your mind is deluded and you remain unaware of the real identity of the 4 elements in the Tathagata store, you should look into space and see whether or not it comes or goes, or neither comes nor goes. You do not know that in the Tathagata store, Bodhi and its opposite, the void, arise from the self-nature and are identical with each other, because the element of space is fundamentally pure and clean, embraces all, and manifests because the minds of living beings know and distinguish between things. The 10 quarters, Ananda, are like an empty pit filled with space, which, in accordance with the laws of karma, has no given place nor direction. Ignorant worldlings attribute this to cause, condition, and the state of the self as such, because their consciousnesses differentiate and discriminate without knowing that the language they use has no real meaning. The element of perception. Perception knows nothing by itself and only manifests through form and voidness. As you are now in Jetavana Park, you see light by day and darkness in the evening. At night there is light when the moon shines, and darkness when there is no moon. This light and darkness are discerned by the seeing, but is this seeing of the same nature as light, darkness, and the void, or not? Is it the same or different from them? Ananda, if the seeing is of the same nature as light, darkness, or the void, we come to this. As light and darkness alternate, and when there is one, the other disappears. Then, if the seeing is one with darkness, it should vanish when there is light, and vice versa. As the seeing disappears in both cases, why are light and darkness still seen? As they differ, it follows that the seeing is beyond creation and annihilation. If so, how can the seeing be the same as light and darkness? If the seeing is not of the same nature as light and darkness, try to find out what this seeing looks like apart from light, darkness, and the void, without which there can be no seeing, like the hair of a tortoise and the horns of a hare. As light, darkness, and the void differ, where can the seeing be? As light and darkness are in opposition, how can the seeing equate with them? If there is no seeing without light, darkness, and the void, how can it differ from them? If you try to separate the void from the seeing, you will not find their boundaries. If so, why are they not the same thing? When you see light and darkness, your seeing does not change, so why does it not differ from them? If you look closely and minutely into all this and examine it again and again, you will find that light comes from the sun, darkness from the moonless night, clearance from space, and obstruction from the earth. So where is the begetter of this essence of seeing? Since the seeing can discern whereas the void cannot, they can neither mix nor unite. and we cannot say that this essence of seeing comes from nowhere. You should know that perception by seeing and hearing, which pervades all and essentially does not change, and boundless unmoving space, as well as its moving counterparts as such, the elements of earth, water, fire, and wind, all of which are called the 6 elements, intermingle by nature and are the fundamental uncreated and unending Tathagata store. You are infatuated by nature and do not understand that seeing, hearing, feeling, and knowing fundamentally come from the Tathagata store. You should inquire into them and see if they pertain to birth and death, if they are one or many, if they pertain neither to birth nor death, and if they are neither one nor many. You do not know that in the Tathagata store, self-natured seeing is basically the enlightened perception which is pure and clean, embraces all the Dharma realm, and manifests because the minds of living beings know and distinguish between things. Like seeing, which pervades the whole Dharma realm, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching, as well as the activities of body and mind, have wonderful virtues which are bright and universal, and so are not in a given place or direction. They manifest according to the laws of karma, but ignorant worldlings think wrongly that they are causal, conditional, and due to the self as such. Because of their consciousnesses, they differentiate and discriminate, and do not know that their language has no real meaning. The element of consciousness. Ananda, consciousness has no origin, and is an illusion arising from the 6 organs and sense data. Look at this holy assembly, and turn round to see those present. Your eyes are like a mirror, which cannot discern, while your consciousness notices in turn the presence of Manjushri, Purna Maitrayani Putra, Maudgalyayana, Subhuti, Sariputra, etc. Does this consciousness come from perception, form, or the void? Or does it emerge suddenly without any cause? Ananda, if your consciousness comes from your seeing perception, then, in the absence of light, darkness, form, and the void, there would be no seeing. And when there is no perception, how can it create consciousness? If your consciousness comes from form, that is not from perception, then, when light and darkness are not seen, there are neither form nor the void. Then how can non-existing form create consciousness? If your consciousness comes from the void, that is neither from form nor perception, the absence of perception means also that of discernment, which implies the non-perception of light, darkness, form, and the void. And the absence of form is the end of all external causes. How then can your seeing, hearing, feeling, and knowing occur? Thus, without form and perception, consciousness, which comes from the void, simply does not exist. On the other hand, if it exists in the absence of objects, what can it discern? If your consciousness suddenly emerges without any cause, why cannot it discern the moon in the daytime? Now, look closely and minutely into all this. Your seeing perception depends on the pupils of your eyes meeting an external object, which is when there is form, and is not when there is no form. These are the 4 causes, that is, the seeing, eyes, form, and voidness, from which consciousness arises. But which one of them creates consciousness? Since consciousness is always moving to differentiate, whereas perception is still, for it does not discriminate, they cannot mix and fuse together. Your hearing, feeling, and knowing are in the same category as your seeing, but your consciousness should still have a source. If this consciousness comes from nothing, you should know that perception by means of seeing, hearing, feeling, and knowing pervades everywhere, and comes not from any source. Moreover, with space, earth, water, fire, and wind, they are called the 7 elements, the natures of which are real and intermingle freely, being but the uncreated and unending Tathagata store. Ananda, because your mind is unsettled, you do not realize that the seeing and hearing that arouse consciousness comes fundamentally from the Tathagata store. You should look into the consciousness inside the 6 entrances and see if they are the same or different, exist or not, are neither the same nor different, and neither exist nor not. For you do not realize that in the Tathagata store, self-natured consciousness is the enlightened basic Bodhi, which embraces and pervades the whole Dharma realm, is not to be found in a given place or direction, and manifests according to the laws of karma. Ignorant worldlings think wrongly that it is causal, conditional, and due to the self as such, according to the way their consciousnesses differentiate and discriminate, while they do not know that the language they use has no real meaning. Ananda's understanding expressed in his gatha. After listening to the Buddha's profound instruction, Ananda and the assembly realized that their bodies and minds were now free from all obstructions. Each understood that his self-mind pervaded the 10 directions of space, which he saw clearly, like a leaf held in his own hand, and that all things were the wondrous and bright fundamental mind of Bodhi. While his essence of mind embraced all and contained the 10 directions, he looked back at his own body given him by his parents, which was like a speck of dust dancing in the great void, sometimes visible and sometimes not, like a bubble rising and falling aimlessly in a boundless clear ocean. After seeing all this clearly, they all realized their fundamental, profound, permanent, and indestructible self-minds, and brought their palms together to pay reverence to the Buddha, thanking him for showing them what they had never seen before. Thereupon, Ananda praised the Buddha in the following gatha.
O thou serene, all-powerful and unchanging Lord, rare is your all-embracing supreme Surangama, which helps me to root out wrong thoughts that have been held for untold eons, and teaches me how to realize Dharmakaya in an instant. May I now win the fruit and achieve enlightenment to save living beings countless as the Ganges sands. To myriad Buddha lands I now offer this mind profound to repay my debt of gratitude for the grace of the Lord. Humbly I now implore the world-honored one to seal my oath to re-enter the 5 turbid realms, wherein if even one being fails to become a Buddha, I shall at once renounce all my claims to nirvana. O great hero, the mighty, the compassionate one, may you also destroy my last secret delusion, so that I soon attain to Bodhi Supreme, sitting in Bodhi mandalas everywhere. The void to an end may come, but my firm mind will not flinch.